Super. Thanks very much, Declan. And good morning, everybody. Great to get the opportunity to talk to you again. Feels like quite a while ago since we last spoke, but here we are. Here we are. So hopefully you're all well. Hopefully you all had a good summer, and hopefully you're all set for the exam next week. So it's my job over the next 45 minutes or so to get you there. So what we're going to do is we have about 45 minutes. I'm going to spend about 35 of those minutes covering off the mock exam. Okay, so what I'll do is I will go through the questions on the mock exam, and I'll give you an idea as to what it is that we're looking for if those were the real questions that come up next week. Obviously, it's mock exams, so there will be quite a number of changes, so they won't be the same. But I'll give you an idea as to what we'd be looking for if these were the questions that came up. But there's a possibility there'll certainly be some similarities in terms of some of the questions, and there's a possibility even one or two that might be exactly the same. So do if you haven't had a chance already, do get a chance to do spend some time looking at it. But I'll cover off in detail what it is that we're going to what we'd be looking for if they were the questions. And then I'll spend the last kind of 10 minutes or so just I'll put away the mock exam and I'll take out the real one. Only I will be able to see it, I'm afraid, but I will go through the real exam and give you some hints as to what areas to focus on. So that'll narrow down your areas to study a little bit. Okay. All right, so if we get right into it, on the mock exam, the first question, well, first of all, sorry, in terms of the short questions, there are short questions at the beginning of the mock exam. They make up 25 out of the 100 marks, if I remember correctly. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to cover those off. I'm just going to send you those, okay? So I'll probably send you those at the end of this session, okay? So you can read through them. If they match your answers, fantastic. If they don't, and you've got any questions and you can't see where you went wrong, you feel free to email me and I can cover them up. But I'm not going to spend time going through the short questions. I'll just email you the answers, okay? So what I am going to spend time on is the longer ones, okay? Because there's 8 of them there. I'm not going to cover off the 8th one because that's a very detailed one, but I am going to cover off 7. So we are up against the clock, okay? We got about 5 minutes for each, okay? So the first long question is quite simply outline the benefits for firms engaging in international trade. Okay, outline the benefits for firms engaging in international trade. That's the first of the long questions on the mock exam. And the answers to the information that you need to answer that question are contained on pages 20 to 24 of module 1. Okay, 20 to 24 of module 1. That's where you will get the answers for that particular question. Okay, and the first reason why, and the title of the topic in the notes is "Why do firms internationalize?" Okay. So there's an element of crossover in terms of the number of in terms of some of the reasons that they do it. So there will be some crossover in some of the examples I give. But the first reason that they do it is they do it to seek opportunities for growth by diversifying into international markets. Okay, so the domestic market, countries adapt and adopt products and services at different rates. Some countries, when the market is still growing, they are declining in other markets. Okay, so one of the ways you can address that if you're a company is by launching your product in a different country. So maybe in Ireland, you launched a product 2 or 3 years ago. The demand for that product is beginning to slow down or beginning to drop. One of the solutions that you can do to elongate the lifespan of that product and to make money is to start marketing that product in France, the UK, Germany, wherever. Okay. So that's one of the reasons they do it. They diversify into international markets so that they can grow the product in international markets to compensate for the fact that the demand might be slowing down domestically. Okay. Second reason is to earn higher margins and higher profits. Okay, so obviously if you sell your products to, if instead of selling it just into Ireland, if you can also make a success in the UK, in France, in Spain, and Germany, obviously that you're going to make more money. Okay, because you will have sold your products to more customers than if you just stick to Ireland alone. Okay. The third one is to serve key customers that have relocated abroad. Okay, so I gave the example if you were there during the induction session. I did give one of the examples of a client that I had years ago who decided they were going to base themselves. The main decision makers for that client were based in the US. the section of our client decided they wanted to be right next to them, so they decided that they were going to base a lot of their operations in the US. So guess what? The company that I worked for at the time decided, okay, we're going to appoint a couple of key people, and we're going to send them out to the US as well. So it's to work closely with customers who have relocated abroad. So if your key customer says, well, we're going to start selling our products in France, if they're very, very important to you, you may want to get yourself some sort of presence in France as well. Another one is to be closer to supply sources. Okay, so if you have raw materials that are available in a particular country, you can ship those raw materials over to wherever it is that you're going to turn it into the final product. But another alternative is to start basing your factories and your manufacturing and some of your operations there next to the raw material. So rather than shipping the raw material, you can maybe turn them into the final product there and then in the country. Okay, so there may be some advantages in doing that rather than shipping it, presumably on the cost front. Okay. Another one, which is obviously very common, and the one that is probably the most prominent if you were talking about internationalization in the media, would be to gain access to lower cost factors of production. Okay, so there are scenarios whereby by relocating large parts of your operation from one country to another, you can potentially have 2 or maybe even 3 people doing the same job at the same cost to have one in a higher cost location. Okay, so obviously companies are always looking to maximize their profits. They're always looking to keep their costs low. So one way of doing that is to relocate large parts of your operations to different parts of the world where it may be cheaper to have employees. Another one can be developed economies of scale. Okay, so again, if we focus on one of the clients that I previously had, the client would spend millions developing a product, but once they developed the product and perfected it, the cost of creating 100,000 units of the product was only marginally more than creating 1,000 units of the product. So, the key cost is the investment in the research and development. One of the reasons that the companies may look to go international is because it gives them the opportunity to develop their products further. They can potentially create hundreds of thousands of units and sell hundreds of thousands of units and make the same profit on each unit as they would if they only sold 1,000 of them. So it can be obviously the more people you sell to, as long as you have your marketing and your price strategy and so on correct, the more money you're going to make. Okay. And is this the last one? No, I've got 2 left. So the second last one that is covered off in the notes is to confront international competitors. Okay, so to thwart their growth. Okay, so if one of your competitors, similar to your clients, if one of your competitors says, right, we're now going to go into France and we're going to gobble up the French market, you may want to. I mean, one, that suggests that there's money to be made in France. Okay, probably. Okay, and 2, you may want to get some of that market share. I mean, if they dominate the French market, the opportunity for them to maybe offer products back in Ireland at a cheaper cost or a better product and so on, is potentially high. So that may destroy your company. So if they go into France, you may want to follow them in there and say, okay, well, that means there's a market there, and let's make sure we get some of that market share so these guys don't become too big. And then the last one is to invest in a potentially rewarding relationship with a foreign partner. So there may be a great big company, maybe let's say in India, and you say, okay, they're doing something that would complement our service or our product very, very well. We should really come up with some sort of strategic alliance with that company. And so you investigate it, and maybe that company is not interested in going international. Maybe they just want to stay in India. But that's not to say that you can't go into India and say, well, let's develop some sort of big strategic partnership that will benefit both our companies. So there's a number of them there, a little bit of crossover between some of them, particularly at the beginning, but that is basically what we're looking for in terms of answers as to why companies would go international. Are there any questions on that? No. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so what I will do now is I'll move on to question 2. Okay, so question 2 on the mock exam is explain the risks in international business and what you can do to minimize them. Okay. So again, this comes from module 1. This is covered off in pages 14 to 16. Okay, so slightly earlier in the module than what we had for question 1. And there's also some more detail on it in the last 10, 12 pages of module 3. Okay, so it goes into a bit more detail towards the end of module 3 after we've covered off cross-cultural challenges, which are coming up shortly. Okay, excuse me, but in terms of the answer that we're looking for this, there's four things we're looking for. There are basically four risks in international business, okay? Excuse me. The first risk is cross-cultural risk. Okay, so this is the risk of assuming that everything in all parts of the world is exactly the same as in Ireland, because obviously it's not. Okay, so the first one is cross-cultural risk. Okay, so people coming up with misunderstandings in terms of how to talk to people, misunderstandings in terms of language, religion, customs, mindsets, all that kind of thing. All the stuff that we covered off in module 2 and most of module 3. That is the first risk. Okay, so cross-cultural risk. You're an American company and you're assuming that everybody in India lives their life exactly the same as everybody does in America, which is not obviously not the case. Okay, so cross-cultural risk is the first of the four risks. Okay, second risk is country risk. Okay, so country risk is essentially, what is the risk of doing business in the country? The very first and the most obvious one that might come to mind in terms of an example of country risk would be a security risk. How safe is it to actually operate in the country? How well does the government operate in the country? Okay, some governments, they fall regularly and there are elections all the time. Sometimes those elections are linked to violence. That would happen in some countries. There'll be other countries where elections tend to run fairly smoothly. Governments tend to go most or all of their full terms, so you don't have a leadership changing all the time. That'd be the type of questions. Can you enforce your contracts in the country that you're going in? How easy is it to move money around? How powerful are unions in the country? Are there labor shortages? Will you be able to get the labor? Are there infrastructure shortages? Are the roads good enough to move your product from A to B? Is the Wi-Fi good enough for you to be able to do business there? All of those are examples of country risk. Okay, so that's the second risk we're looking for, country risk. Third one is currency risk. Okay, so if you're trading in euro or you're trading in dollars, but the country that you're going to be working in is not going to be using either euro or dollars to do business with you, you need to know, okay, well, what are the exchange rate risks that you have with it? Okay, how strong is the currency? Does it normally fluctuate within a relatively narrow window against the dollar, against the euro, or is it up and down like a yo-yo? And in January, something might be worth only a tenth of what it is worth in May. That is the third risk you need to consider. Okay, currency risk is the third one. Okay, and the fourth and final one is commercial risk. Okay, so this is very similar to the risks that you would have and the mistakes that you might make doing business at home. Okay, you've appointed the wrong manager. You have adopted the wrong pricing model. Okay, so you're charging an awful lot more than your competitors are. Your marketing is wrong. You're targeting the wrong people for your product. Okay, those are examples of commercial risk. They would apply even if you only do business in Ireland or in one country. They apply even more so when you go internationally, and you may need to keep in mind, if we take example of a poor manager, the labor laws in countries are different. Okay, you might have appointed a manager, you might work out after 2-3 months that they're not very good. If it's in America, you can probably just go into the office and say you're fired, and then they grab their coat and off they go. In other countries, it's not as simple as that. You can't just go in and fire the manager. You may have a contract for a couple of years, or you may have appointed somebody that maybe is an important person to the government in the country, and that may cause you some problems in terms of continuing to deal business in. So the fourth and final risk out of those four is commercial risk. Okay, so those are the four risks. Now, just quickly, if we go back over them again, there is how you manage the risk. Okay, so in terms of, if we go back to the cross-cultural risk, the way to manage the risk, well, for starters, the very first thing you do in terms of managing risk is you read module 2 and you read most of module 3. Okay, because that gives you a very good insight as to what it is like to do business in 20 of the largest countries in the world. Okay, so that's the first thing you do. So the options in terms of what you do to manage cross-cultural risk is you accept the differences and you say, okay, well, that's just the way it is and I'm going to change. You adapt to the differences. Okay, so you say, well, we're going to change our ways of working, or you adopt new practices. Okay, so you take a model like Singapore, which kind of combines East and West, and creates a good model, a good business model for working that is neither Western nor Eastern solely. Okay. On the currency risk, there's a number of things you can do. You can put a couple of lines in the contract that say all of our dealings will be in euro or all of our dealings will be in dollar. That's one option. You can indicate that all payments will be made in the currency of the home country. Okay, so you can say, okay, so we realize your currency is different, but all payments are going to be made in euro, and that's just the beginning, middle, and end of it. So any risk is on the customer's side. You can do a spot rate for the currency, so you can agree that you can move the risk off yourself and agree with your bank that it's going to be a particular rate. So the risk is with the bank and not with you. Or if you're a big company, which some of the clients that I've seen in the past have been, you can have a number of different bank accounts. So even if the dollar is at an all-time low against the euro, it doesn't mean you necessarily need to convert them from dollars into euros at that particular point. You can wait till the exchange rate is a bit more favorable. So that's what you can do to manage your currency risk. And then for country risk and commercial risk, I'll probably take these two together. The key is research, okay? Research and learn as much as you can about doing business in the country that you're planning on going into before you do it. How safe is it? What is the economy like? What is the government like? What is the legal system like? What are the labor laws like? Learn all that stuff before you go in. Make your right decisions and hopefully keep your errors to a minimum. So there's a lot in that, plenty of stuff to write, but that is basically what we're looking for in question 2. I'll pause there for a moment. Any questions on that? Okay, hopefully all is good. I'll just quickly flick onto the screen, make sure I'm not talking to myself. Get a thumbs up that someone can hear me. Yeah, terrific. Thank you very much. Okay. So I'll just pause for a moment and just do a quick sidestep because it's important. I want to make this point a number of times before we dial off, and it's just crossed my mind, so I'll do it now quickly. Just to be clear, on international, it's not a scavenger hunt. Okay, so we're not looking for you, even though I'm telling you that the answers to these questions are on page 14, 16, 20, whatever it is. It is important to know, in terms of, for the purposes of the exam, we're not looking for a scavenger hunt. Okay, it's not a case of, oh, I found the answer and then I kind of highlight it and then keep going down and say, okay, now it moves on to another topic, so I'm going to paste that into my answer. That's not what we're looking for, okay? You will get some marks if you do that, but you won't score particularly highly, okay? If you do want to score well, what we are looking for is we're looking for the answers, but in your own words, okay? With your own examples, okay? I've given a couple of examples as we've been going along, saying this is that and this is why, and here's an example of this and here's an example of that. If you can do the same in the exam next Saturday, you're going to score well, okay? But it is important that I stress it's not a scavenger hunt, okay? So it's not a case of, okay, I found it in the notes, so there, Paul, there's your notes back. We know what's in the notes, okay? But what we want to know is, excuse me, have you understood what's in the notes? You know, would you be able to talk about it if you went out into the big bad world? So the best way to do that is to explain it in your own words and with your own examples and say, okay, this is my understanding of the material. Okay, if you do that and you can do it in detail, you will score very well next Saturday. Okay. All right. The only other thing that, because this regularly gets asked, so I'll just quickly cover it off now, is what sort of length of things are we looking for? I will be honest, the people who tend to write the most tend to be the ones who score well, but there are people who sometimes are just very concise in what they write, and they make their point and they move on, they make another point and they move on. They don't write an awful lot, but every single word or every line that they put in is really, really good. So you can say, right, well, point for that, point for that, point for that, point for that. So they're kind of concise. They would be another group that would tend to score well. The people who maybe don't score as well are the ones who write a lot, but they just repeat, or they're very general about the stuff they put in. You know, they make the same point 4 or 5 times and say, okay, well, yeah, I got it. You know, it's good you make it a second time, but I didn't really need to see the 3rd, 4th, and 5th time. So those people, so I suppose, be exact, put examples in and explain things in your own words rather than giving back the notes that we gave you, okay? Because we know what's in them. Okay. Okay, if you have any questions on that, shout. If not, I'll move on to question 3. Question 3 is, what are the main factors to take into account when dealing with people in different countries? And that's covered in module 2. and most of module 3, okay? And what would be great in this, in terms of getting a good score, would be put in lots of examples, okay? Because there's a pretty good chance if you work in any way internationally, you may have seen some of this in your own experience, okay? So what is it we're looking for? I mean, these are basically the headings that we have throughout module 2 and module 3, okay? They occur in most, if not all, of the different countries that are there. So the headings that we talk about greetings, okay? Because in some countries, it's shaking the hand, and sometimes it's kissing on the cheek. In some cases, it's bowing. So you know, the different greetings that you have across the world, that's the first topic that we're looking for. Basic etiquette, including do's and don'ts. Okay, all countries have things that that maybe they're not too proud of, either in the history or modern day. So you know, we've covered off in each of them. You know, what are some of the things maybe to avoid as topics of conversation if you want to do business and don't want to get off on the wrong foot. So basic etiquette, including do's and don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that. In some countries, interrupting people is, you know, kind of maybe part of normal everyday life. In other countries, it's extremely rude. So, you know, in some countries, it's okay to refuse things. You know, if you don't want tea or coffee, just say no. In other countries, it's immediately taken as a little bit of a slight sign of disrespect. So, so basic etiquette, do's and don'ts. Okay, these are headline topics that we have throughout modules 2 and 3. Verbal communication. How do we talk to people? Is it acceptable to raise your voice? Is it acceptable to shout a little bit? Is it, is it, how will it be taken if the tone of your pitch when you're speaking changes? All of that is covered off in modules 2 and 3. So that's one of the topics we're looking for. Equally important is non-verbal communication, okay? Personal distance, eye contact, okay? Is constant eye contact expected, or is it going to put off the person that you're dealing with? In some countries, silence is certainly okay, and it reflects that people are thinking. In other countries like America, silence might very quickly become awkward, and people will talk to fill it. So that's another one. Meetings, obviously the biggest one, I think that's probably in the notes. How do you conduct meetings in different countries? Okay, how do you do collections calls in different countries? Okay, all of that is covered off. And the relationships a little bit away from work. Okay, so it might be, well, this is how you handle the meetings, but this is how you handle things when the meetings are over. Okay, some countries, they might invite you to dinner with their family and they very much expect you to go. Other countries, they maybe less so. They may not be looking for that. So that's a shorter one to explain than maybe question 1 or 2, but those are the things we're looking for. Okay, it's the headings of the different categories in modules 2 and 3, and the key way to score well there, as well as putting them all in, is to do lots of examples, ideally ones that maybe you've seen yourself, rather than ones we have in the notes. Okay, so that is how you answer question 3. Any questions on that?
Sorry, Paul, I just have a quick question. Do we need to reference a specific country, like in our examples? With that?
It wouldn't hurt, but you don't necessarily lose marks because of it. I mean, you know, some of the examples I've been giving, I've said in some countries this happens, in some countries that. Now, I will be honest, part of that is because I don't always know where everybody's from, so I don't necessarily want to kind of pick a country. Somebody can jump on and say, "Well, no, it's not like that." Where I may have just been talking off the cuff, but absolutely, referencing a specific country is great. There's nothing wrong with doing exactly as I've just done and saying in some countries this happens, but in other countries that happens. Okay, so you don't necessarily need to say in some country these are the countries where they do the kiss on the cheek, these are the countries where they do the bowing. You can simply generalize a little bit and say in some countries this is what happens.
Super, thank you.
All right, no problem. Good question.
Hi. What if I don't deal with international companies? So can I just like make up a scenario as an example?
Absolutely, yes, would be the short answer. You may well have traveled to other countries, so would that be the case, Louise?
Oh, well, yeah, not very many countries, but yeah. yeah, but even from that, you may have noticed certain things. So maybe, I mean, one of the things I would say to people is, I mean, and particularly in relation to this course, I mean, it might be a bit different for the law, but for international, one of the things I would kind of say is, I mean,
you know, you do have experience, you know, both work-wise and non-work-wise. You do have experience. Maybe you don't have it necessarily on the work front, but you will have it on the personal front. Have a little bit of a think, and in some ways pretend you're going for an interview. You know, I mean, if you're going for an interview, you don't, you know, I don't tend to just rock up on the interview and say, right, let's just see what questions they ask me. I try to think a little bit and say, okay, if they ask me this is what I'm going to say. If they ask me that, this is what I'm going to say. Maybe do a little bit of that kind of prep ahead of the exams. I mean, there will definitely be, you would get away with studying just module 2 and module 3 for the exam. Okay, there will definitely be, you need to answer 3 questions. There will definitely be at least 3 from module 2 and 3 on there. Okay, so have a little bit of a think. Are there examples that you could come up with to kind of say, okay, well, as you're reading the notes, is there examples you can think of where you might have seen this happen, even if it's outside of work, or when somebody came to you? Maybe you might have had people who, you know, maybe you didn't travel, maybe people came to you from a different country and you observed this as, oh, you know, he or she stands very close to me, for instance, you know, which is, you know, and I immediately found myself standing back, you know, because it wasn't the way that we normally do it in our country, you know. So just have a bit of a think of maybe examples. But yes, I mean, there's nothing wrong with making something up. I suppose as long as it's vaguely plausible, yeah.
Right, okay, so I've got a couple of scenarios in my head that might have happened on holiday of how different cultures act. I can use them as an example.
Yeah, culture doesn't end at 5 o'clock in the evening when the working day ends. So absolutely, it's 24/7. So absolutely, it's perfectly acceptable to bring non-work examples into your example.
Okay,
but I really encourage examples. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. Anything else on that, or we move on to question 4? Okay, perfect. Okay, so question 4, quick enough answer on this one. What are the main differences on how a meeting would be conducted in 5 countries of your choice? Okay, so there's 20 countries in there in the notes, and there's obviously potentially more that you guys have visited or worked with over the years as well. So how do you do meetings in 5 of those countries? Okay, they're covered off. So again, covered off in module 2, most of module 3. Any examples you can give would be great. Conscious you may not have done. I mean, I'm not even sure myself if I've conducted meetings in 5 different countries, 3 or 4 maybe, but not even sure if it's 5. And if it is 5, it's not that many more than 5. But anyway, the topics that you would need to talk about is, I mean, what are the things to consider when doing a meeting in a different country? Punctuality, okay. If you arrive at 9 o'clock and the meeting is for 9 o'clock, are you going to be there on your own, or will everybody be there pointing at their watches, expecting you to have been there since 8:30? How formal or casual will the meeting be? Okay, so in some countries, people will sit down, they'll start making small talk in the queue for the coffee, and they're already well underway by the time the meeting starts. In other cases, it'll be very formal, and there'll be an expectation that the most senior person in the room will start and then move down to the next most senior, and so on. Okay. How do you handle greetings and introductions? Okay, so that's what I just mentioned. Okay, so it is an order of seniority. Do you need to introduce yourself, or do you need to wait for it to be done for you? Okay, if you do introduce yourself and you're immediately kind of saying, well, I've done this and I've done that, in some cultures that will be seen as very boastful and a bit rude. If you don't do it in America, it may pass you by, and people will think you haven't done anything, because the expectation is that you will start with kind of, well, I'm Paul, and this is my position, and here's how I got to that position by doing this great thing and that great thing. And so you may be left behind if you don't put that forward in the US. How to handle business cards, that's covered for most if not all of the countries. How to handle small talk. Okay, is it a case of is it acceptable to discuss business in the queue for coffee, or is it a case of, well, there'll be absolutely no business spoken until maybe even an hour after you've sat down and the meeting is formally started? Okay, that does happen in some cultures. How you introduce yourself and how you handle disagreements and objections as well. When you're there to do business, you won't always agree on things. How do you move past impasses? Okay, so there's a number of different categories. They're all covered off in modules 2 and 3 under the specific topic of meetings. But there's it should be fairly straightforward to compare the countries as to how they would handle meetings. If you've been to them, great, bring in those examples. If you haven't and you've never been in a meeting with people from certain countries, then okay, use the ones for the notes, but do put the things in your own words and do show that you've clearly understood what it is that we're talking about in the notes.
Paul, can I just ask something there?
Yep.
when you're doing that, all the points that you're going to make, say, for the differences, would they all be in the same 5 countries? Or like if you took a point on punctuality, could you choose 5 countries and then, you know, maybe on greetings, could you change some of those countries?
I suppose if you had to, if you felt more comfortable doing it, yes. I suppose ideally, from the purposes of kind of comparison, it would be the same countries throughout.
Okay.
So probably better to do the same 5 countries if you can. Are you going to be clobbered in terms of marks if you deviate a bit? No.
Okay.
Not if there's good quality in your answer. No.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Like.
Yep.
Ask a question. It's just wondering, in terms of covering that kind of topic, so would an Excel document do, like an Excel tab, would that be something acceptable or not, with different columns, and you would just mark gradings and so on, and then you would just, you know, that would work in terms of headcounts? I don't know, would that be something that you could consider, or would it have to be written?
Nobody's ever given us an Excel document to my knowledge in the 4 years that I've been doing this course. No. We'd probably be looking for a little bit more detail, I suppose, because I'd say if you did an Excel document, if I was doing an Excel document, there would probably be only a couple of words in it. It's kind of, you know, punctuality, very important, not so important. People will arrive late. That's probably all I would do if I was doing an Excel document, which would be fine if it was just a question of me needing it for a meeting where I'd have a quick glimpse of it or something. But we'd kind of be looking for a bit of detail. So I would say you'd have your Excel document full fairly quickly, probably after about 5 minutes of typing, if you knew the stuff well. And it's great you know the stuff well, but we're probably looking for a little bit more detail. So you could do it, but I'd probably steer away from it.
It's funny, okay. That's how I've structured the notes for that section.
I think it's perfect for learning it. But in terms of developing it, in the same way, again, going back to the interview example, if somebody asks you, okay, did you work for this company for 5 years? You're not going to say yes, and then leave it at that. Okay, you're going to say yes, and in those 5 years, this is what I did. So that's developing the answer. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking for. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry, Paul, just on that one, again, is it better to list the country and the different headings under it and explain what it is, or do the different headings and list the countries under each one? Saying
either's fine. I've seen both whenever we've asked it in the past. Yeah, I've seen people who do a chunk and say, right, this is America, and here's what America is like, and then they move on to Japan, and this is what Japan is like, and then I've seen the reverse. I've said kind of punctuality, and then this is what it's like in America, Japan, and they work down, and so on. So I've seen both scenarios, and either is fine.
So you would do like divisions, sort of, and then subdivisions, then, to kind of go through all that.
Yeah. That would be a well-structured answer. You don't have to do it that way, okay? But that would be a well-structured answer. It makes it easy to read. And when you're doing a number of exams, the ones that are easier to read and that you say, well, there's good material in this and it's well-structured and easy to read, they tend to score well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, time is against us, I'm afraid. Yeah, one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick one. Somewhere in the notes, I read that you had to learn 7 countries, and China and USA were going to be in the exam.
Yeah, that is mentioned. I can't remember where, but yeah, that is mentioned somewhere. But you can disregard that.
Right.
You can disregard that. I'm happy to accept. I'm happy to accept any 5 countries. Either from the notes or from outside of the notes, and they don't necessarily need to be China and the US. There's probably the weightiest material in terms of China and the US, because they're not all necessarily the same length in the notes. So the US and China are fairly meaty in terms of the answers. So you'd have a lot of material in that. And I do know from my own point of view, I use the US quite a bit on examples. I've dealt with quite a number of American clients, but you can disregard that point.
All right, okay, lovely, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I better rock on because we're nearly at 10 to, I'm afraid, and I want to have a bit of time to talk about the real exam. So, excuse me, question 5 is write a note on the 10 separate risk category. The 10 separate risk criteria to be included in your operational risk model. Okay, so do be a little bit careful on this one because it's a bit different. There's 10 different criteria that we need covered off. Okay, so it's not just a case of doing the 4 risks that we talked about in the earlier question. Okay, so these are covered in pages 67, 68, and 69 of module 3 there, after all of the cross-cultural challenges. Okay, so I've touched on some of these already, but just to repeat what they are, the 10 that we're looking for is security. Okay, how safe is the country? Political stability, how stable is it? Government effectiveness, the legal and regulatory environment. Okay, so how well does the legal process work? It's all well and good having a contract, but if a judge is going to disregard it no matter what's in it, then that's not maybe the best place to be doing business. Macroeconomic risk. Okay, is there a recession likely? Is there devaluation likely? Foreign trade and payment issues, okay, can be challenging when you, which I have seen myself, when you bill $1 million to a country in Africa and then the country can only send you $10,000 a day. It's going to take you a little while to clear that balance, and I have seen that in real life. Labor markets, okay, how strong are the unions? How effective? How is the labor market? Are there actual people there who can do the job that you're looking to do? Financial risks, okay, so again on the currencies, tax policy, and then the standard of local infrastructure. Okay, are there the roads that you need if your product needs to be shipped? Is there the Wi-Fi if you are setting up? If you are setting up maybe just offices rather than factories. Okay, so there's 10 different criteria there. That'll obviously reduce the amount of detail that you can put in, but again, give a couple of quick examples like I've had there. Okay, we wouldn't be looking for as much detail there as we would on the earlier question where there was only 4 categories. Because there are 10, so you're going to have to divide your time a bit more cleverly. But do give us a couple of examples that I've just done to kind of show what it is that you're talking about in relation to that. All of the details are in the notes, pages 67, 68, and 69 in module 3. And there's loads you can write about there if you really want to. Okay. Okay, question 6. Explain with examples the effect a foreign exchange risk can have on transactions over time. Okay, so there's an example here on the notes. This is, do I have the page number? I do. This is pages 71 and 72 of module 3. Again, it's after the cross-cultural diversity stuff is finished. Okay, so the example that's in the notes, I'll just read it here for you. If you agree to buy 1,000 items for $20 each to be delivered next month, if the exchange rate on the dollar is 91 cents to $1 US, the 20,000 worth of goods will cost you 18,200. Okay, and then if you add a 5% profit margin, you're going to be selling the goods for 19,110. Okay, all right. So, however, if the dollar strengthens and is now worth 97 cents instead of 91 cents, the price of the goods increases to 19,400. Okay, so that means you have lost 290 euro on your transaction. Okay, so you are selling your goods. You bought your goods for what is effectively 19,400 euro. You have sold your goods for 19,110 euro. So that means you have lost 290 euro on the transaction. Okay, if the reverse scenario occurs, okay, so if the dollar, if the rate falls and the dollar is now only worth 85 cents, the price of the goods in euro falls to 17,000. Okay, so it's going to cost you 17,000 to buy it. You're going to sell them for the same price, which is 19,110. You're now going to make 2,110 euro on your transaction. Okay, so the example is there on pages, what was it, 71 and 72, was it? 71 and 72 in module 3. It shows you what happens if the rate goes up. So you bought everything. So just to recap quickly, you've bought everything at 91 cents. 91 cents, that's euro cents to the US dollar. So it's going to cost you just over $19,000. Okay. If the exchange rate strengthens and it's now worth 97 euro cents to the dollar, you're going to lose 290 euro on the transaction. If, however, it falls and the dollar is now only worth 85 cents, you are going to make 2,110 euro on your transaction because, again, you are charging 19,110. Okay. So So that example is on pages 71 and 72. So if you can quote that example and explain it, that'll get you the marks for that question. Okay, I've got one more to go, but is there any questions on that? Okay, just quickly before I leave that question, once again to repeat, I went through these quickly earlier, but the things you can do to mitigate the risks. One, you can put a line in the contract that says all transactions will be in euro or all transactions will be in dollars. Okay, so if you are the bigger company, chances are you may be able to impose that on the company you're doing business with. If you're the smaller company, it may be a little bit harder, but you can indicate, you know, as long as they're in agreement, you can indicate this is the currency we're going to do business with. So that's one option. The second option is that you can agree with your bank, okay, that we are going to lock the rates between dollars and euro at a certain exchange rate. So that means if it goes up or down, the bank takes the hit or gets the benefit. Third thing is you can have bank accounts. If you're a big company, you can have bank accounts in a number of different currencies. And then the last thing is you can just trade in your own currency. You can say, okay, well, we're going to be doing business in, this is our currency. You know, we're based in Ireland. Euro is the currency in Ireland. So everything is going to be in euro. Good luck. Okay. So those are the things you can do to mitigate the risks. And finally, lastly, we're going to be running a little bit over, but the last question, so this is question 7. I'm not going to do question 8 because that's on the legal systems, okay? It's a very long section. I'm not going to be able to cover it off, and it's not going to be on the exam anyway, okay? And I'll repeat that now in a minute. But question 7, which is the last one I'm going to cover off in detail, is discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the 4 main collection options open to large multinational companies, okay? And these are covered on pages 5 and 6 in module 4. Okay, so this is where you've decided you're going to scatter your collections. Are you going to scatter or centralize your collections operations, assuming you're going to do business internationally? Okay, so advantages. So the first option you have is you can carry it out in the customer's own country. Okay, so if your customers are all in France, you can say, right, we're going to base all of our credit and collections activities in France. Second option is and you can do the same in Germany, and you can do the same in Italy and so on if you have your operations spread across those countries as well. The second one is you can centralize it. So a lot of companies, certainly in the past, have done this. They've chosen Ireland as being somewhere to centralize their operations. So they get some German speakers, some French speakers, some Italian speakers, and then those people call the customers in it. So we're going to go through the advantages and disadvantages of that in a minute. Third option is to split it. Okay, so can you so you can put some in maybe a shared service center, let's just say for argument's sake in Dublin, and you put some others locally in France, in Germany, in Spain, and in Italy. And then your last option is to outsource it all. Okay, so you hire a company to do all of the collections activity for you. Okay, so that's a fourth option. Okay, so just quickly, the advantages and disadvantages of doing it in a customer's country. If you do it in a customer's country, there's likely to be strong local knowledge. Okay, chances are the people you've hired are from that country, so we'll know that country pretty well. You can go and visit the customers. Okay, you have greater scope for customer visits. You have greater scope for building relationships with teams like sales and marketing because they're more likely to be based in the other country. And there's a less chance of cross-cultural risk. Okay, if you hire a team of collectors in France, there's a pretty good chance most of them are going to actually be French. Okay, and if they're dealing with customers who are in France, your cross-cultural risk is either reduced or gone. The disadvantages of doing it in a customer's own country is it's going to be harder to do the type of knowledge sharing that you might in shared service. Okay, so if you have a shared service model, if there's an improvement that the German team come up with, that can be moved onto the French team and onto the Italian team and so on nice and easily. You're likely to have less support for credit and collection specific tools, okay, because it's spread across Europe. And there may be an issue in terms of management as well, okay. You may not have you may have sorry, that's a different example, but there may be less synergy. Okay, if you've got a French team based in France, an Italian team based in Rome, and a Spanish team based in Madrid, at best you're going to be able to get them together kind of a couple of times a year, or they'll have to build a relationship remotely. So it's going to be a little bit harder to build that relationship, but not impossible. Advantages of doing a shared service format is the opposite. You can have the knowledge sharing, you can have better management, so you can have a full-time European credit and collections manager. You have savings in terms of office space because you might need one office in Dublin and none in Paris, none in Rome, none in Madrid. And you've greater team synergy. Okay, the French team can go out and have drinks with the Italian team, and they can go out with the German team, and so on. All after work, and better synergy can be built. Okay. The disadvantages of the opposite of what I just said: less customer visits, less working with marketing and sales, and less local knowledge. Okay, there may be some cross-cultural risk. Okay, they may not be from the countries that they're doing the collections in. They could all be Irish, for instance. Okay, all right. So you can combine the two formats, and you can put some locally and some not locally. Okay. So you can combine it. Gives you a bit of agility, a bit of flexibility. Can become a little bit of an us and them type scenario. And then the advantages of outsourcing are you can tap into expertise that your outsourcing partner may have. The disadvantages of outsourcing is it becomes a bit more difficult to resolve things like disputes, because there's more handovers that need to happen in terms of getting things resolved. So I've done a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through that just in the interest of time. But just before I move on to the real exam, are there any questions on that? Okay, great. So apologies. I think we're probably going to finish about 5 minutes late, but I will now go on to the really important bit, which is the real exam. I'll give you an idea as to what's coming up. Okay. So first of all, there will be the short questions. Okay. So I'm going to email you the answers to the short questions for the mock test now shortly. But there will be the similar format. There will be some short questions there for you. That's 25 marks available. Okay. And then there's there's going to be 8 more long questions. Okay. Of which you need to do 3, and there's another 25 marks for each of them, giving you 75 marks plus the 25 for the short, for a total of 100. Okay, all right. And in terms of what is on so the short questions can come from anywhere, so you do need to have a good working knowledge of all 4 modules to answer those. So I would encourage you. People tend to score pretty well in those questions, but I would encourage you. They're not too difficult, but I would encourage you to have a good working knowledge of module 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order to answer those. But in terms of the longer questions, this is what's going to be on them. Okay. Question 1 and question 2 are both from module 1. Okay. So that's 2 questions from module 1. The first of the 2 questions is very similar to a question in the mock paper. Okay, so you have a good knowledge of whatever whatever on the mock paper is from module 1. If you know the answers to those questions pretty well, you should be able to make a very good stab at answering this. The second one also comes from module 1.
Have a lovely weekend. Enjoy the rest of it.
One today because it's not really messy.
You are. We're getting tidier.
Yeah, and the beans are kind of. Yeah.
All right. No, but
Thanks for that.
and good luck to them heading back to college and schools.
Sir.
And I will talk to you very, very soon.
Sorry, Jacinta, could you go on mute?
Apologies.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So just to repeat that. So question 1 is from module 1, and it's very similar to a question on the mock paper. And question 2 is also from module 1, and it is early in module 1. Okay. So early in module 1, so the early stuff in module 1, that'll be where to focus on if you want to answer question 2. Okay. The screen is stuck for a moment. Okay, question 3. Question 3, as I said before, there's going to be plenty of stuff for modules 2 and 3 on the cross-cultural stuff. So, so the first one is a question 3. Okay, so that comes from module 2 and 3. And that is, I can more or less give you the question. It's discuss how you would approach something differently in 5 countries of your choice. Okay, so that could be how you do a meeting in 5 countries of your choice. What are the differences? How you do a collections call, how you do a customer visit. It might be something like that. Okay, so it's 5 countries of your choice. How would you behave differently in relation to something? And obviously we'll tell you what the something is in the exam. But the answer to the questions is from module 2 and module 3. So that's the 3rd question on the real exam. Question 4, again, comes from modules 2 and 3. So again, it's in cross-cultural, and it's very similar to a question on the mock paper. So that's out of the first 4 questions, 2 of them are very similar to questions on the mock paper. So if you know your mock paper well, you potentially have the opportunity to answer 2 out of the first 4. Okay, and you only need to do 3 in total. So question 4 comes from modules 2 and 3. It is on cross-cultural, and it is very similar to a question on the mock paper. Question 5, again, comes from modules 2 and 3. So again, it's cross-cultural. So that's 3 questions on cross-cultural, 3, 4, and 5. Discuss how you'd approach something differently in 5 countries of your choice. Okay, so again, it's similar to question 3, but it's obviously a different topic. So examples of what the topic might be is, how do you do a meeting in 5? What are the differences in doing a meeting in 5 countries? What are the differences in doing a collections call in 5 countries? What are the differences in doing maybe a customer visit in 5 countries? Okay, those are the kind of types of examples that come to me off the top of my head. I can't remember exactly what's on it, but there's 2 of those type of questions. Okay. So again, it's on cross-cultural. Okay, so again, to get the marks, examples. Okay. Question 6, we move beyond cross-cultural at this stage. That is also from module 3, but it's on the section that comes after the 20 countries are done. Okay, after we finished all the cross-cultural stuff on 20 countries, there is another section. Okay, that section there appears on it appears as question 6 in the real exam. And I think from memory, there may only be 1, maybe max 2 topics that come after that in module 3. So it is on module 3. It's after we finish talking about cross-cultural, and that is question 6 next week. Okay. And questions 7 and 8, I can give you the same answer for both. Okay, they are both from module 4. Okay, so if you only did module 4, if you really liked module 4 and you only did module 4, you would have enough material to do 2 questions. And it is not the legal systems. Okay, the legal systems appeared on the mock. Okay, if I remember correctly, let me just scroll up to me absolutely sure. Yeah, the legal systems appeared on the mock. Okay, and you also cover them in your second assignment. So we've given you enough on the legal systems at this stage. It's not the legal systems. Okay, so there's 2 questions on 2 topics that are on module 4, and they're not the legal systems. So if you can identify what they are and you know them well, you can answer those questions. And that, I think, is it. Any final questions that anybody has?
Okay, all quiet, Paul. What I'll do now, I just stop the recording.